This is David with BestRest Products, home of the Cycle Pump tire inflator that has a lifetime warranty. Today I'm going to be doing an install video showing installation of the Cyclops Evolution Safety Turn Signal Inserts. Now that's a long name. Cyclops Evolution Safety Turn Signal Inserts. Let's just call them signal inserts. What is it? Well, what it does is it's an electrical system that will convert your front turn signals into daytime running lights or nighttime running lights. When you activate your signal, either one, that signal will flash the normal yellow, but the other one will stay on white. You switch your right signal, it does the opposite thing. In the rear, what it does is converts your rear turn signals into auxiliary brake lights. So when you apply the brake light, both rear signals come on bright red using LED technology. If you're making a turn, you signal left, that left signal will now flash, but the right signal stays on as a brake light. Now what you've done is you've increased your conspicuity. Being conspicuous to other traffic is something that we all strive for. We want to be seen to protect ourselves. And the more we can do that, the better off we are. I'm making this video in conjunction with Cyclops. You can order these kits from either Cyclops Adventure Sports or from BestRest Products. We work very closely together. We're friends, but I do all the videos. So let's talk about what's involved. These inserts come in a box. It's a complete kit, everything that you need. It contains a wiring harness that looks rather complicated, but it's not. And it contains 4 LED insert boards. These fit into the existing turn signals on newer model Aprilia, BMW, Ducati, KTM, Triumph, and Zero motorcycles. But we're also going to show you how to convert a motorcycle that doesn't have that configuration of turn signal and put those new stocks on the bike and install it on this bike. My 800 is what we're going to work on today. It's an 08. It's got kind of a bulbous turn signal, but we found replacement signal stocks on eBay for about 20 bucks a pair, and I'll give you the source for that at the end of the video. But what I'm going to be doing is removing the internal components of the signal assembly, replacing it with this board, running a wire into it, and then running the electrical system into the bike. That's the front, which would have a white running light or a yellow turn signal. There's another one that goes in the rear, and this is red only, and these convert those turn signals into brake lights. We wouldn't want to mix these up. They're very easy to identify, and the instructions that Cyclops gives is really quite well written. So if you follow this, you don't need to watch the video. But as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. People will probably find the video is easier for them to understand and absorb the process that we're going to go through. Cyclops also provides all the connectors that you need. They've got Posi-Tap connectors, which allows you to tap into a hot wire on the bike. They've got zip ties to help you to route your wires and hold them in place. They've even got a couple of crimp connectors should you need to make a change to the wiring. You shouldn't have to, but they provide these just in case you have trouble snaking a wire through one of those turn signals. Let's talk for a moment about this harness. It looks like a jumbled up mess, but it's not. I've simplified this because I actually read the instructions. And what I did was I laid this out and marked the components and how they work. The wires I'm hanging onto right now in my right hand, these go to the front turn signals. The wires on the left go to the rear turn signals. There's a red wire there that goes to a trigger on the rear. Typically that would be the tail light. A trigger wire means a wire that is energized when you turn on the key, but when you turn the key off, everything shuts down. On the right side, I have 2 wires going to the signals, and I have a yellow trigger wire. So really the only thing I have to do to tap into the motorcycle is connect a rear brake or rear light trigger and a front light trigger. Then we have connectors for the battery terminals. So if you remove your battery terminals, you have red to positive, black to negative. Or if you have a fuse block of some sort, you would run these to an appropriately fused connector on that fuse block. This system takes 7.5 watts, which is less than what you're using currently for your turn signals. They're probably incandescent, so they're probably taking 15 watts each. So you've saved a lot of juice from your motorcycle's alternator output. The harness, which I've gathered up to make it easier, is split at one point, meaning that you don't have to snake everything through. Instead, Cyclops has provided for the rear some bullet connectors. So instead of having to take everything apart, try to snake both of these relay boxes, if you disconnect this, this will allow you to snake just wires and not have to get the boxes through. The other thing they provide for BMW applications is an 8-inch extension. Now, if you order this specifically for BMW, it will come with an additional 8 inches of wire to reach to the back of the bike. That allows you to go underneath components and not have to take rear grab rails off or anything like that. If you find that your wires are too short, these can be provided. I had them provided separately instead of making the harness 8 inches longer. It's just a minor detail. So once again, we have connections to the battery. We have the relay and the white wires that go to the front and the signals. I have actually marked these relays with a small sticker, a post-it note, so that when I'm doing my wiring I don't accidentally get them backwards. The instructions tell you what color the wires are and where they go, but for me it was easier to mark them before I began. And again, I've done the same at the back. I've marked that relay rear, and I've also marked my trigger wire with a little label that says trigger. Overkill, but when you're doing an electrical project, a little organization ahead of time goes a long way. So how does it work? How do we change these things out? If you have a motorcycle with this tapered teardrop design, these inserts will fit. And like I said before, it applies to Aprilia, BMW, KTM, a whole range of bikes. They all use the same design. But what you're going to have to do is remove this lens, take out the reflector assembly, and then put another wire into this housing so that you can mount the reflector in there. And there's a little clamp that we're going to put in place to hold everything there, and then once that's done, we put the lens back on. But let's say that we don't have this style of turn signal. We have a style that I have on my 800. No problem. We just take that whole assembly off. We order replacement signals from eBay. Like I said, these are 20 bucks a pair. When you order, I recommend that you get the clear lenses like this lens here instead of a smoke lens. Smoke looks cool, it's dark, but your lights will work better if you're dealing with the clear lens. You'll get more brilliance coming from the LED emitters. Now it's just really a matter of starting to unbolt things, figuring out our wiring, and making sure that we've got everything in the right place. And this process should take, let's say half an hour, 45 minutes. Depends on how careful you are in your wiring and how carefully you want to secure things away. I like to tuck things in nice and tight, so it may take me a little bit longer. But let's begin. Rather than trying to do the install actually on the motorcycle, which is difficult to get the right camera angle and the lighting, we decided to use a taillight assembly off a motorcycle and do most of the work right here. Now, you're going to take this concept and translate it to every single signal that you're working on, because the process is the same. And the process is going to be the same regardless of whether you're using the signals that already fit the Cyclops or whether you're converting old ones to new ones. The tools that we need, we've got a pair of wire strippers. We probably won't need that, but it's handy to have it out. A probe so that we can hook wires, a wrench or Torx screws so that we can loosen The screws, usually a 10mm wrench, because that's usually the size of the nut that you'll need, a small slotted screwdriver, a small Phillips screwdriver, needle nose pliers, a pair of cutoffs. We might need black tape, probably not. A magnetic retriever for when I drop something I can retrieve it with my big fat fingers, and a dental mirror, which is handy to see inside when you can't get your head in there. The final thing that we'll want is we'll want a little bit of silicone seal, a little bit of RTV sealant, and I'll explain why we need that. A tip that I've learned. You may not need it, but I found it was helpful. In the Cyclops kit, we have all these little components that I have laid out right here. These little wishbone or H-shaped fittings are designed to hold the signal in place on the stock. We'll describe that later. We've got a couple of Posi-Taps. What a Posi-Tap is, it allows you to tap into that hot wire, that command wire, without doing any splicing, without doing any wire stripping or anything like that. It fits over the wire, it goes in with a needle and connects to the strands or the filaments inside that wire, and then allows you to make basically a T connection for that command wire that you'll need both in the front and the back. It's got a couple of pieces of dual lock. Now this dual lock is used to hold the relay to the motorcycle, attaching it to a surface basically the same as Velcro but much heavier duty. And then finally, I mentioned before, they gave you a few extra spade connectors. These are female connectors, so that if you have to make a wire cut, you can connect things back together after you're done. Probably not needed, but that shows the level of concern that Cyclops has for giving you everything you need for this kit, and they even include some small zip ties so you can make your wire bundles nice and tight. So let's begin this process. Regardless of whether you have the old style like I do or the new one, you're going to have to remove the screw that holds this lens assembly in place. On the new style, the screw's in front. On the old style, it's in the back. Just get a very small screwdriver and loosen that. Now here's a trick, and you have to be careful about this. When you lift this off, you have to be careful that you don't break this little plastic tab at the back of the signal. It's got a hook on it, and that hook goes down inside and engages a slot in the assembly. If you're ham-fisted, you're going to break that off and your lens will be basically useless. So be very careful with this little hook in the back. Treat it gingerly. Once you've done that, you're looking at the reflector, and you have to pull this reflector out, and it's difficult to get a hold of. So if you use a probe and just get it started, it will come right out of the black plastic housing. Well, what I have now are two wires. I have a blue and a brown, or your motorcycle may have different colored wires, but typically brown indicates the negative ground and blue indicates the positive hot lead. What we have to do is we have to pull those off the back of the reflector housing. If you grab it by your hand and pull it hard, you may damage the wire. So I suggest that you use a pair of needle nose pliers and pull it right off the spade. Pretty easy to do. And now this is off the bike. This can be set aside, put it on your shelf. You'll not need it. The next thing you'll need to do is unscrew the bolt or the screw that holds this signal in place. It's a Torx for this bike. It's got a nut on the back side. In this case it's 10 mil, and I've already taken this nut off, but when you're doing this, make sure you cup it so you don't lose it. Now you can't pull this out. Usually what you have to do is rotate this assembly 90 degrees one way or the other. And once you do that, the tang on this little stud aligns with that release slot, and now I can pull it off. Once again, it's like this. I give it a 90-degree turn, I pull it straight out. On my 800 it doesn't have that slot. Instead, I just pull it backwards and it will disengage. Now I have the signal assembly hanging down like this, and I'm ready to begin my work. If I was going to replace the new style with the old style, it would be a very simple process of just pulling this assembly off the wires. Take the old signal assembly, set it aside, bring the new one over, and then feed these wires back through the hole. Now you won't have as much loose wire to play with as I've got here. It may be a little bit tighter and more fiddly, but you're basically just feeding these wires back into that hole until both of them come out. And then we're going to take the white wire, in this case this is the rear, it doesn't matter which wire you use, you're going to snake it through the same hole that the factory wires came through, and then you're going to slide it into the hole of the turn signal stock and start pushing that through. Now different bikes have a little bit different clearance in there, and you may find it difficult to get all three wires through. One reason that Cyclops gives you these spade connectors is so that if you're having difficulty with that, you would take and cut that off. You would crimp on a new spade connector. They provide you with some shrink wrap tubing so you can shrink wrap that. And now I have all three wires inside this turn signal assembly. Before we go on though, I want to mention that this turn signal assembly actually comes apart. You can pull this signal right off of the stock entirely. And we don't want that to happen when it's actually on the bike. The way that it keeps from coming off is when you put the reflector in place, it fits down into a couple of slots on either side. And the purpose of these funny looking little figure H's that Cyclops provides is it gives you another locking mechanism. But depending upon the bike, these may be a little bit loose, so that's where our silicone is going to come in handy. And we're going to put a little dab of silicone on this retainer, and that will hold it in place. I don't recommend using super glue because that's a permanent assembly, and we want to be able to take this apart maybe sometime at a later date. So let's put that back together. It's just a press on. Now we're going to take some silicone and put it on this locking tab, and we're going to press that down into place, and it should snap or fit snugly, and that process is done. Next we have to take the appropriate LED insert. Now the ones in the rear are white like this, and the ones in the front have yellow. So had I put this in, I would have gotten them backwards. The ones for the rear have an all white face. The ones for the front have white and yellow. The box is actually marked, R for rear, F for front, but once you take them out and you're looking at them, you may get them confused. Just remember, it's all white for the rear assembly. Next, I have to connect my LED assembly to the wires. The white wire that I've just snaked through connects to the terminal marked R+. That's connection number 1. Ground is the brown wire. I make that connection. And the final wire, which is our hot lead, in this case happens to be a blue wire, and I press that in place. So I made 3 connections. Just make sure that you get the white wire, or the wire that you've just snaked through, to this board that's marked R+. Then I'm going to push my wires back into the stock. I'm going to gently fit the LED panel into the black housing. Now on some bikes there may be some distortion of this plastic. You can take a piece of sandpaper or a file and gently relieve any sharp edges on this LED assembly, but just be careful, don't go overboard. Then we take our lens assembly. Remember this delicate tab, we don't want to break that. We put that into place, snapping it down, and we gently rotate the lens into the proper configuration. Finally, we put our screw in. Make sure that you get it into the hole. I got it wrong at one point. And tighten that screw down, being careful that you don't strip it out because it's plastic, and if it strips you're going to have problems. So that assembly is complete. Now we take the stock assembly, we feed the wires back through, we align the tab or the tang on this stud with the slot, get it into place, rotate the assembly until we can get our screw in place, tighten our screw, put our nut on the back side, and this assembly is done. Now we move on to the other 3 turn signals on the bike. So we've gone through the process of the installation. Actually, putting the inserts in the signals was fairly easy. We did encounter some issues with those eBay lookalikes. I'll cover that in other parts of the video, some trimming, some things we had to do. But we've got our command wire running to the front off of a running light in the headlight. We've got it hooked to the turn signals in front. We have a brilliant white driving light, and then we have the signals. We ran our wiring back. I've got a fuse block in the back of the bike, so I modified the system a little bit by running all my power through this fuse block. If you have a 1200 LC newer model, those positive negative leads are going to go right down to the battery, and you won't have to take all the body off the way that I have. You can snake that up underneath the tank and bring it up and do all your fittings there, and ditto back here. It just depends on the bike. We're not going to go into all the bike details, but some common sense will apply. You have to get to the tail light assembly so that you can tap into that brake light hot lead. That's going to control the system in the back. And again, in the front, you have to tap into a hot lead that is turned on when the ignition is turned on. I didn't hook to my low beam light because that only works when the engine is running. So I ran off of that auxiliary little running light in the headlight, and you saw the stills in the movie earlier. But it's been a good setup. This is a Saturday afternoon project. I was optimistic when I said it would take 45 minutes. It did, just to put the inserts in, but the time I spent wiring, and I did a couple other wiring projects, it probably took me 4 or 5 hours to get this done. It's always good to have help, a buddy that can help you with the process. Steve did a great job of standing by, handing me tools when I needed it, making sure I didn't get myself in trouble. So that's the process. We have converted the turn signals in front and the brake lights in the rear. We did it for about $300 plus the cost of the eBay stuff. When you compare that to another product on the market, they're $500. And so you can save yourself a lot of money by doing this yourself and ordering these Cyclops Evolution Safety Turn Signal inserts from BestRest Products or CyclopsAdventureSports.com. This is David with BestRest Products, home of the Cycle Pump Tire Inflator. We'll see you on the trail. So here we have the running lights showing white. I'm going to use right turn signal, and you'll see that the right signal is flashing yellow and the left running light stays on. Now I'll switch it. Left signal on and right driving light or running light on. If I go to emergency flasher mode, both of these signals still work in the same configuration, and as soon as I turn off the emergency flasher, they go white. So that's what we've done in the front. Let's go look at the rear. We turn on the ignition and we get the tail light showing. When I apply the brakes, both of the lights shine bright red. If I have a signal on and I apply the brakes, the signal flashes yellow, but the other light comes on red. There's left signal. Now I've applied the brakes. And finally, if we go to four-way flashing mode, you do not get red, you get yellow flashing as normal, but you get a much brighter yellow because of the LED emitters. When you're removing these lenses, you have to be very careful because there's a locking tab on this lens. And if you don't rotate this out in the proper fashion, you'll end up breaking that tab. So we take out our screw and then we gently there's one for the books. When you're inserting the lens onto the housing that has the Cyclops emitter, you have to be careful that you don't break that locking tab on the lens. So when you put it down into place, you rotate it gently and get everything in place. Snap it gently so that it fits all the way around before you put in your screw. And if it's not quite tight, you can push this up a little bit. Well, that's not how to do it.
Okay, 27.
Start over. Just start that whole part over.
Cyclops 60 turn signalers, take 27.
So we've done all the wiring. We've got the signals in place. We've got the LED inserts in place. The wiring was a little more fiddly than we expected because I'm pretty fastidious about this. I got a lot of electrical systems in the bike. We checked all the systems with a volt-ohm meter, continuity tester, make sure everything's right. We are ready to fire this bad boy up. So here we go. Whoa!
Ah!